What's up, NIO family? It's Rey-Jay back with another video. And in this one, I want to break down what's happening with NIO, Tesla, SPY, and the overall market. I'm also going to break down why tomorrow is going to be a very important day for EVs, not to mention our very important data that's coming out. But just note that I am not a financial planner, so take nothing I say as financial advice. And also, if you guys can, please check out my Webull link. We deposit any amount of money, you're guaranteed 12 of free stocks. We deposit $500, you're guaranteed 20 in total. And deposit $25,000 or more, and you're guaranteed 75. The offer ends very soon, in just about 3 weeks from now. Anyways, now let's talk about the market. So NIO is doing a good job at holding up, but we have this tough resistance to watch where we have 6.35, 6.48 as our resistances. If we break past those levels, this could be looking for the gap fill and could be pushing back up to $7. But so far, we're going to be testing this resistance as we approach tomorrow. Tomorrow will also hinge upon, what happens with the economic data. So I'm going to talk about that first before I break down more details about these charts. So tomorrow is going to be Thursday, October 10th, 2024. It's 10:10, and 1 hour before the market opens, just note that we have the very important CPI report. We're expecting pretty much everything to go down except for core inflation year over year. That's expected to be very similar, if not the same. So we'll see what the numbers end up looking like. We also have initial jobless claims coming up before market opens, so it's going to be very, very key. So get ready for all of that. After all the data comes out, we have just a couple of bill auctions, and everything else is going to be more minor. Get ready for the big data for tomorrow. It's going to cause a very, very high amount of volatility. I also want to mention that right now, the market thinks there's about a 70.4% chance we get a 50 basis point cut and about a 29.6% chance we get a 25 basis point cut. So we'll see what we end up getting, and CPI could dictate how this ends up being looked at. On top of this, the market's very greedy. We're very close to extremes. I think by tomorrow morning, this should show extreme greed or very close to that. And momentum is back at greed alongside other indicators. We're very, very greedy as buyers are continuing to step in. The puts and call option ratio is also once again approaching this interesting neutral place. We are starting to see some shorts piling into the markets as we go higher. So be careful with that coming out. Also, the VIX is neutral. It is dipping to fill its gap, so it does have some more downside potential as the market has upside potential, but that's just temporarily because the VIX will get a spike eventually as the market dips, so be ready for that as well. Now, when it comes to other factors, I just want to mention that we have big earnings coming out for Friday with JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, and BlackRock. But everything else for tomorrow is going to be very minor. We just have Delta Airlines, just a couple like that. For other pieces of news, NIO has partnered with Abu Dhabi, very, very important holdings companies, which is once again opening an alliance in the Middle East. And I think this is very, very cool. Very, very great news for them as they're expanding to different areas. There's also some news right over here about how we just got their sales data. So not bad for the very, very start of October. NIO got about 4,500 from September 30th to October 6th. Very strong start so far. And usually the first week after the end of a quarter is not as strong. So this is pretty good, and things should be looking a lot better as things progress as time goes on. So not bad. I know that's a little bit of a decrease. It's because it's a decrease compared to the last week because last week was the end of the quarter for NIO. That's why they saw a big surge in their sales. So as long as we maintain this, then by the end of October we get stronger sales, we should be fine. JP Morgan has maintained an overweight rating for NIO. The price price ratio is dipping a bit as NIO lost some strength. We'll see if it bounces to gain that strength again. And then historically, Thursdays are green only about 49% of the time, with a lot of volatility at 1 p.m. and then also around the second to last hour of the day. We had 69.6 million in volume. That's above average. And in terms of short volume, this is also kind of like flat right now, so we'll have to give this some time. So what do I see for NIO? What is my prediction thus far? NIO has resistance around this 6.35 area to 6.48. I think tomorrow we could push towards this resistance zone. We'll see if we get a rejection or not. If we break 6.48, we're looking for this gap fill all the way up towards just under $7. So we'll see if that ends up being the case. And if we reject it, we'll be coming back down. I think a lot of this hinges upon what's happening with CPI. So if we get a decent CPI tomorrow and everything's below expectations, we could see NIO try to push up for $7 or at least 6.48 at the very least, and we'll see then 7 after that if that breaks. If we reject, we'll be dipping back down closer to 6, so we'll see what ends up happening. Another factor is going to be Tesla's robotaxi event, but that's not going to happen until 7 p.m. Pacific time. So it's going to be late at night tomorrow. They have the big event. If they unveil the Model 2, the new model, and the robotaxi on top of that with the cybercab. If they unveil the cybercab and the Model 2, this thing could actually bounce very nicely back up into these higher levels. If they don't unveil a new model, or if they end up trying to display robotaxi and it fails or something like that happens, we could still dip all the way down to the 230s. So it could go either way. We just have to wait and see what Tesla announces, so be very patient nonetheless. On top of that, I want to mention that for the broader markets, as far as SPY goes, big factor is going to be CPI. CPI is going to either cause us to dip or bounce. The market looks very optimistic approaching CPI. I think there's a good chance we could attempt to go a little bit higher. So I think that we could be looking for us to get very close to 580. If that breaks, this thing is going to be looking for like 582. I think we could get close to 580, but then I still believe that the market is going to form a top very soon, very close to that range before we start to dip a little bit. So my view is that we might push a little bit higher for the 580 target if we get a decent CPI. If we get a poor one, we're looking for basically 572 to be retested. But this chart's favoring it wants to go up to about 580, then we'll see what kind of reaction we get. For ES, we look a little bit more bullish as we're trying to break right here. This chart is technically favoring. We want to go all the way up to about 58.50. We could be looking for a push tomorrow morning after CPI comes out. But then whether or not we hold that level depends on different factors. We'll see about that. If we end up losing 58.20, we're going to be dipping back down to 5800 flat, close to the 20 EMA. Will CPI be hot or low? Most likely it's favoring upside, but we'll have to wait and see just to be safe. For Nvidia, we're dipping a little bit because we pumped quite a bit after our AI event has started. It's been the AI summit for Nvidia. If we're bullish, we're looking for basically 135. And if we turn bearish, we want to see it lose 130 and hit 128. It's possible we pop a little bit, then we start dipping back down to the high 120s. So give it the time it needs. For Bitcoin, we have kind of like a head and shoulders like structure. If we end up losing 60,000, we're looking for a dip back down towards 58,750. If we're bullish, we want to break past 61,800. It's looking a little bit more bearish. It does favor downside a bit more. Could pop with CPI and start dipping lower, but the chart remains a little bit more bearish for the 60,000 target. For others out there, we have NQ. NQ looks more bullish. If we break past 20,500, we're looking for 20,600 as our next target. If we lose 20,300, we're looking for a dip back down to the 20,144 area. This chart is favoring. It wants to go above 20,500 for a bigger push. As we have a nice looking double bottom like structure, we have this like this big these imbalances above here to fill. So we could be looking for 20,500 or even higher than that for more upside. I think there's a good chance we try to push higher. For the QQQ, we have a double bottom like structure. We came down, came back up, made a higher low, and we're just going to continue to do that. If we break this resistance, we're looking for basically 495. If we end up rejecting here, we're going to be dipping back down to about 488. This is favoring upside for the gap fill for 495 is the most likely case. We could push to 495 to 500, but be careful up there because that's going to be a tough resistance, and this could turn south after that. So be mindful of that, guys, as the market remains more bullish, and we'll see how things develop. For Aapl remains more bullish as well. We could be pushing for 230, but then we'll see how we end up reacting. It depends on CPI, but so far the chart's favoring upside. So it could push a little bit more before we see a top forming. For the IWM, this is trying to rebound. It's actually kind of flat right now. We could continue to consolidate. It's been in a very, very tight area. So look for a test of about 220, and we'll see if you reject or not. Could attempt to go a little bit higher with CPI coming out, so keep that in your mind. Coinbase is dipping, looks a little bit more bearish to me. Could pop to about 168 and reject. If we don't reclaim 169.44, we could just kind of pop and drop and then come back down to fill the gap towards 163. For Amazon, we have resistance around 185. If this breaks, we're looking for basically 187. If this rejects, we're going to be dipping back down towards 182.97. So watch to see if we get a rejection here. We're at some tough resistance. It's possible we kind of pop a bit and start dipping back down depending on CPI. But I do anticipate there might be a little bit more upside before anything else, and then it could dip. Meta looks a little bit weak. We made a lower high relative to the high. If we lose 587, this is going to be dipping back down to the low 580 area. There's a risk of it dipping lower. It might pop with CPI and start dipping, so be mindful of that. For Microsoft, we look a little bit more bearish. We have not been able to hold above 420. We could pop with CPI coming out, but there might be a dip coming afterwards as we have a nice rejection here. So be very mindful of that. For Google, we are dipping right now on Google. It's a little bit weaker as well. It's trying to base at 162.5, but there is still a risk of downside looking at the current trend. The VIX is kind of suggesting that it's going to dip a little bit lower as the market pushes higher, so we might see more upside tomorrow as it comes down to fill this gap. But later on down the line, there's still potential for there's still potential for the VIX to push to try to fill this gap up here. There's a big gap to fill over here. So this gap might get filled up here later on because the VIX might get a bounce. So this might dip first as the market tries to pop, and then this might see a big rally as the market gets a rejection later on. This suggests that the market has some upside coming temporarily, but then we could dip later on depending on how things go. With that being said, for NIO, it might follow the trend of the market, try to push a little bit higher. I anticipate that we're going to be hitting the 6.35 and 6.48 levels tomorrow for a bit of a push. Then we'll see how things go. So I just want to say I appreciate you guys so much for listening. So have a great day. I'll be back tomorrow to report how CPI ends up going. Thanks for listening, and peace out.